All right. Well, good morning and welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Heavyweights podcast. I'm Ashton Hines, half of the Real Estate Heavyweights. I'm with my good friend, mentor, and a guy that's just taught me a lot about the real estate industry in the last year, Tavis Westbrook. What's going on, Tavis?
What up? Good morning. Good morning. I'm doing well.
Freshly off the gym, Tavis.
It's a good thing, It's a good thing. I need to, been trying to get back into it for a while. Before COVID hit, I was doing actually really well and rode it all the way up until they closed the gym doors, So, and then, of course, like many other people, COVID became the excuse of just disrupted my my lifestyle there for a while. So, anyways, it's been a long time coming to get back into a routine. So it's going good. Shout out to my buddy James Lysing. He's been my accountability partner and been back in it as well. Again, him and I were both working out together back in 2020. So we both let it become an excuse.
So, I have this client I'm working with now that is he's into jiu-jitsu, and I did jiu-jitsu for a while when we were in Louisiana, and I just really love it. I'm really wanting to get back into that. So his talking about it, and it's such a great workout, and it's really good for flexibility. And the older you get, the more flexible you can get, and just core strength. So I think I may try that out. I don't know. I may get in there and tear a ligament in the first week or something and decide that's probably not a good idea. But
don't talk that, We've done this before on the show. We know if we talk it into an existence, it's going to happen. So don't talk about bad stuff.
Yeah. I don't want bad things to happen for sure. So I need to get out and get more active
like we used to.
No, I've gotten sick twice in a row. And so I'm like sort of taking stock of this whole, what's going on? What do I need to do to just be healthier? You go from having COVID to the flu in a month period, and it's just like, man, I gotta do better. So anyway, trying to get active out there. And it's funny because one of the articles we're going to talk about here in a little bit was talking about how they really see gyms as, with all the meds that are coming down and people losing weight, gyms are going to be a huge thing in the retail space. So maybe we'll touch on that in a little bit. But first off, let's do a little bit of a market update. So we're in the DFW area, and the market is similar in that shows to pending is still about 10 to 13, depending on what county you're looking at. Percentage of sale of original asking is around 95 to 96%. So a little bit low. People are still, having to dip a little bit when things are originally listed.
And that's actually great. I mean, 95 to 96%. Yeah. I mean, when I got into business, it was like you were doing really well if you could get 90% of your asking price.
You had to drop it a ton. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that was normal, right? Like you negotiate 10%, that was over 20 years ago. So, that's great. I mean, you could be, and again, that's average, right? So that's across the board, that's
Definitely.
taking dated homes as well as updated homes and looking at that equation. So that 95, 96% would take it.
Yeah, for sure. People are, there's still a seller's market, so you don't have a ton of leverage whenever you find, something that you want. And, everything I'm reading, it just points to inventory. Everyone's pointing at the inventory. There's just such a lack of inventory and months of supply. Our months of supply is 2 to 2.5, depending on the area you're in. And it's very, very low. And there's just not a lot to choose from. So, if you're in the market out there looking.
What are you seeing on average sales price?
Let's see. I think it was 440, but
okay.
I didn't pull that specific statistic this morning. I don't know if I can get it immediately. This just says sales price average. Let's see. Right now in Collin County, we're at 476. Denton's 460. The entire MLS is 365.
Got it.
So, I know for a while they were saying 440 was the number. We live in a little bit of a higher end part of town. Yeah. So 476 in Collin. Yeah.
Wow.
and that's fairly flat if you're looking over, a 12-month period, fairly flat. It looks like in January of last year, it was, well, no, it's gone up some. It's, well, 503. There we go. 503 last January, we're at 476. So we have dipped a little bit year over year. So, um, but a lot of it has to do, whenever you're on the retail side. I have a client right now looking for a really specific house. He's wanting to do a midterm rental, and we put in the parameters, and there was literally zero houses available for, this size, this price, this area. I mean, it was a pretty big geographic area too. And so,
Yeah.
we're either going to have to be patient or sort of be more creative about what we're looking for. I know I had a client for a while looking for a specific neighborhood, Castle Hills. Nothing was popping up there. So, I think this is the time where you have to, if you really need to find something, you have to sort of be open-minded about different areas and different amenities and that sort of thing. So is that kind of what you're seeing out there too?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, and again, it's just, it's playing with the MLS, just kind of, play with different filters and things like that to get different things to pop up.
Yeah.
As well. I've learned. I mean, it's funny because I spent many years in a buyer's market, and it used to be how tight could you get your search engine to pull up the five best homes? Because you used to type in the buyer's market, you used to type in a search engine, and if you were too generic, you'd come up with 100 properties, and so it was like,
Yeah.
oh no, I'm not sending this to my client. How do I narrow
Yeah.
this down, to like 5 to 10 that we're going to show? We're not going to show 20 homes right now,
Yeah.
um, and so it was, I remember you really had to get creative on your search engine and really dialed in. And now it's the opposite. You almost have to like open it back up, and uh, kind of unclick parameters to see what you're getting, and some of that
Yeah, for
becomes
sure.
lazy agents and stuff like that they're not, you know selecting all the boxes and they're just throwing something on MLS.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I
but
found it
yeah,
when I'm looking for houses for these investors, I'm going through having to cast a wide net, 3 to over 1,500 square feet, and they're just looking for cash flow. But, you know, but then I'm going through and I'm spending a lot of time looking at pictures and immediately filtering something out. Okay, yeah, that's already been redone. There's just certain subjective things about a house that you can tell immediately and say, look, this is not for us, but it may not show up in a description or you know, uh, there's not a has this house been rehabbed box,
yeah,
so there's certain things that does, you still spend your time on there. So yeah, but overall the market, our rates are holding steady around, the 7% range, plus or minus depending on which program you're getting into. And so as we get closer to the election, that might change a little bit. A lot of the economists think that we're going to dip a little bit, um, towards the end of this year, that and the Fed inflation target rate is actually getting better, that they think they're floating down a little bit, and so things are looking decent. But it doesn't seem like the bottom's going to drop out of the rates. It doesn't seem like there's going to be this huge crash in housing values. So for a while, it kind of is what it is, and unfortunately, for inventory, is what it is means there's just not a lot out there for people that are looking. So it's just going to be a little bit of a challenge to find the
yeah,
right place. So,
yeah.
all right.
I sat in a discussion last week. Last year's projection, this year's projection with local counsel for a title company, and
Mm,
um, I believe you missed that, right? You didn't make that meeting last
no.
week, but one of the things they said is we can expect, the idea of being back in the fives is, you know, it is a pipe dream. We probably don't see that anytime soon. But it's sixes and sevens, and the stability for the market to survive and thrive and still move forward. 6 and 7s is fine.
Yeah.
If we get back up in the eights, and we start getting eights and up, then we start getting into trouble again. So if
Yeah.
we can maintain average interest rates in the 6 and 7s, I think the economy and the overall healthiness of the real estate market will be fine. I mean, we said it
Yeah.
forever when we were down in the twos and the threes and the fours. This is unsustainable. It's not going to continue. Take advantage of it while you can. When the interest rates were so low. So it's
Yeah.
just people get used to it, and again, what your buying power was then with the interest rate so low, you had this crazy buying power. So it's taken a lot for people to kind of reset, and then of course values have continued to increase. So what their value could buy them for a $450,000 house 2 years ago when the interest rates were low is now less, of what you're buying a $450,000 home for now is now a $475,000 home or whatever you said the average was. So now
Yeah.
that's increased and your buying power has decreased. So it's made it challenging for sure, and that's obviously plays a part of inventory and speed, and how many home sales are going are going to happen. So
Okay, so every week we kind of dive into a little real estate topic or a list of the top 24 things you can do to your home and blah blah blah. And so this week I wanted to touch on this. I was at a client uh, consultation yesterday with some friends, and like I said, they're looking to maybe renovate and move in a few years when they're downsizing. And so one of the things they're looking to do is renovate their bathroom and kitchen. So I was talking through some of the things you can do. They have an old tub and it's taking up a ton of room. We talked about taking that out, maybe making that a really nice walk-in shower area, and then taking their current shower and letting that be part of their closet. Just a few different space things. But one of the main things they're looking at are their cabinets, and they're trying to figure out, can we salvage what we have? Do we need to get custom? Do we need to maybe look at doing the doors? And you may or may not know this, but Tavis owned a cabinet company for a while. And several years ago, I remember looking on Instagram, Facebook, and they would post these pictures of just amazing kitchens they were doing. And a lot of them were kind of a modern feel, but I had no idea a lot of the features and the hinges and all the things you can do with cabinets. And so, Tavis, why don't you walk us through a little bit? So my friends, they're thinking about, you know, replacing or doing doors. So, when you're doing a rehab project, what are some of the things you can consider as maybe when you just start over, and maybe when you want to go ahead and just use what the bases you have and maybe use some doors and new hardware?
I think it all depends on. I mean, budget obviously is a big driving factor. The other thing that's going to come into play is timing, just depending on somebody's timing, because anything that has to be built, has to be fabricated. Even a pre-finished cabinet, for instance, is time consuming. And I say pre-finished cabinet mainly because they come in certain specifics. So you would figure out how many boxes you have. So a box would come in, 12 inches wide, 18 inches wide, 24, 30, 36, that kind of thing. And so, somebody would come out and measure, and then they would figure out how many boxes and then put it together. It still could be like a 2 week lead time. In the custom world, whether it's, building, new boxes or, new bases and new doors and everything else, you can get a little bit more creative on use of space. Um, but it's going to take time. And even if somebody tells you it's 2 weeks, it might end up being 4 weeks. So the issue that you have is, something we've talked about before. It's sequence. So if you are waiting on cabinets to come in, say you tear out your old cabinets, um, that does give you the opportunity to move plumbing around or move lighting around, things like that to kind of adapt to that space. Because now you could kind of do anything, right? You're not specific to what the old cabinets used to be. But you now have a timing issue of waiting on the cabinets to be installed before you can, um, template your countertops, right? And so there's a process there. And if it's a site finish cabinet, which means that it's going to come in raw form, whether it's paint grade or stain grade cabinet, then the painter has to come in and prep and paint that, right? The benefit of a pre-finished cabinet is obviously it's already pre-finished, and that can come in after the wall paint and everything else has been done. and then that would come in. Then you would wait on the countertops. So really, it's kind of just a process of knowing the sequence and knowing what you're up against. My go-to typically with a flip is I always try to keep the cabinets if I can. And if the cabinet doors are just absolutely ugly, um, and they just don't fit the style at all, then I might go ahead and look at just changing the doors and the drawers. The benefit of doing that is it's not delaying me on time to get the countertops templated. So I
Mm.
can get that process going. So I talked about it in this Wiley home that I'm doing. I kept all the cabinets. I actually was able to keep the doors as well. But, these were builder grade cabinets that were put in. They were basically, prefabbed. Well, I think maybe the upstairs cabinets were painted, but essentially they were pre-finished offsite. Had pre-finished interior cabinets that were done. This is a production build in 2002, and so we're able to actually keep all the pre-finished interiors that looks nice, and then just tape that off, and then just uh, paint over the stain grade material on the exterior, and prep all that and paint it. But uh, part of the reason I've been able to move fast on this job is right at demo phase, I knew I was keeping the cabinets, and so I just got the guys in there to template the countertops, and we were able to get countertops installed before paint even started.
Mm.
And so, that's a big thing, right? You've got to kind of look at those pieces. So it's hard. It's a hard, simple question to answer because it's more involved in kind of the overall project and timing and budget and expense. And
Mm-hmm.
but like you've done before, you just changed out the doors. Now, mind you, when you decided to change the doors, it was kind of late in the game. Typically, we would make that
Yeah.
decision before paint. Um, but if you're just changing doors and drawers, you can do that up front. You can pull it out. You can get the countertops templated, and then before paint starts, you have the new doors and drawers fabricated, and that typically might take a
Yeah.
week. Week and a half lead time to get all those doors and drawers fabricated and installed. The benefit of
Yeah.
doing that is you can get rid of the old exposed hinges, that were
Yep.
typically done on 70s and 80s homes, and go with the Euro style, the hidden hinges and stuff. And it looks much
Mm-hmm.
cleaner. They operate well. That you can do the slow close features, all that cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's what I was telling them last night. They have the exposed hinges, and that's drilled into the front facing part of the
mm-hmm.
cabinet, and those European hinges are actually drilled into the inside wall there, and so you have fresh wood, and then like you said, you can get that soft close feel. You could build a shaker type door that's a little bit wider. It's going to cover up, they'll sand and fill all those holes, but it would look super clean, and you're keeping the same bases. And so
Mm-hmm.
to me, if you don't hate the overall layout of the you know, bathroom itself, you could go ahead and do that. Now the problem with theirs was it was a multi-level
Yeah.
countertop where they had a slightly higher, and then it dropped down and comes back up. And so if you don't want to keep that, then all right, now you're having to do some custom work in the middle, or fill in that sort of
Yeah.
thing. and having to take all that into account. So talk a little bit about finishes. Typically your cabinets, you want them to be pretty durable. You want to be able to wipe down a little bit. They're going to be in areas where it's wet, slightly damp, kitchens, bathrooms. And
Mm-hmm.
so what's the I know you've mentioned it's a type of an enamel finish. Typically it's not an oil finish, but it's a latex enamel.
I'm not a fan of the latex product. I mean, if
Okay.
you're in California and things like that, you've got to kind of stick with the VOC and latex type enamel products that are out there because of their EPA regulations. Um, typically with us, we're still doing an oil based enamel. So,
Okay.
because it dries harder, it's harder to scratch. Now typically with oil base, it doesn't necessarily scratch or peel, but it can chip. It because it
Mm.
it dries like a hard coating, if you will. I like the satin finish too versus like semi gloss or that kind of thing. I like just kind of more of that satin sheen. It's got a little bit of reflection to it, but not a lot, and it just has a softer feel, especially on older um, trim work, like older trim
Yeah.
doors, cabinets, things like that. I think the satin has just a really nice finish to it. Anything that once you go into semi-gloss or gloss, it's going to show any imperfection because of the way that the light hits the wood, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to keep in mind. Stepping back just a second, you mentioned multi-level countertops. Um, so it might be a little tricky. I mean, sometimes most women are in the 5 foot range, right? So a lot of times the smaller basin, which would be at a 30-inch counter height typically, and then your countertop sits on top, and then your comfort height, or your not to be sexist, but the men's vanity space typically is higher, and that would be at 34 and a half inches, and then your countertop, right? And so now what you're seeing in most designs trends in today's market is most people are just going with the standard 34 and a half inch countertop to keep it higher at both levels, to keep it clean. But one thing that you can do, and you might have noticed this in some of my projects, that we kept the old vanity, was we just added a above mount sink. And so,
Hmm.
rectangle, clean, nothing super crazy, but kind of like a semi vessel sink. And if you go with something that's only like 4 inches tall, the benefit of that is that your countertop still stays at like 30 inches, but then your sink level, and if you get the one
Hmm.
that has a sink with a faucet on top, then it's at 36. So you're not bending way over to like wash your hands and
Right.
brush your teeth. And so that's kind of a cool feature, and it looks custom, and it has some variants in it because it's not, because it stands up above the countertop. So it's kind of got that
Yeah.
hotel feel to it. So that's a nice little trick you can do versus replacing the cabinet sometimes, is you can keep that lower cabinet and then just add a taller sink. So
Yeah.
anyways,
That's
the
great.
little,
That's a
little
great
trick of the
idea.
trade. Finish wise, again, we talked about it a little bit a few seconds ago. You have, your pre-finished product out there. The benefit of a pre-finished product is that it can come in after paint, and so you could pretty much get all your stuff done and get everything painted, and then bring that cabinet in kind of towards the final when you're doing like flooring and stuff like that, and and hardware. You can get that done, and then get your countertops on it. That's usually just you've got to finesse the lead time situation. But so pre-finished, some of the pre-finished products are really good out there. Another product that we've been exposed to, it's kind of new to Dallas within the last 10 years, but that's called a thermal bonded um, pre-finished laminate. And what that is that's basically like a skin that's put on top of like a pre-finished, box, plywood, Baltic birch type of plywood, and then you wrap the exteriors with these skins, and it gives you a very
Hmm.
Euro, very modern finish. And the nice thing with that is you get these textures and these embossed type feelings and textures that come with that product, or the super high gloss stuff, that you can't. It's very impossible to replicate that man-made wise, right? So these
Yeah.
machines have created this material on 7 foot by 9 foot sheets, and then they're fabricated like granite would be, or countertop, material, quartz, etc. And then they're wrapped with edge bands, and that's all put on your cabinet materials, and it creates a super clean modern look with very small
Hmm.
minimum gaps. And there's a plethora of different color choices and things like that are out there. Now that's going to be your most expensive option, um, to go, is something in that realm, because the quality and the durability of that stuff is like primo. In fact, you've seen it out at my lake, out of my dock.
Yeah.
Now that was a non-waterproof core material that was, obviously intended to go interior of homes, and we have this outside in the elements.
Yeah.
But now they have come out with a waterproof core interior, so I have already bought the materials for that, to be used out there, and the plan is to swap all of my exterior skins of my cabinets out at the lake, um, to this waterproof core material. Again,
Yeah.
it's expensive. It's not cheap. It's anywhere from $250 to $300 a sheet. Just
Hmm.
for just for the material, and then of course you got to fabricate it, and it is built around these boxes and everything else. So,
Yeah.
so kind of talking pre-finish in that world. And then the most common thing that we see a lot is the site finish cabinet, right? So this is what you show up, and it's usually made with a combination of um, either like poplar or birch type wood, and MDF. All right. So the benefit of MDF is it's super smooth. There's no grain to it. So if you're doing a paint finish cabinet, so let's say you're doing a shaker cabinet, a lot of times the exterior part of the door is going to be made with some kind of hardwood, like poplar, birch, etc. And then the interior panel of that might be MDF. Um,
Hmm.
and so, anyways, that's your site finish type product, paint grade. And then the interior boxes of that can either be MDF or particle board or plywood. Right, plywood obviously is going to be much more durable, much more long lasting. It's going to be much more durable if you have a water leak. Particle board obviously isn't going to hold up very well to water leaks. If you've ever flipped a house, you've seen damage in cabinets from water, right? It happens. So, that's kind of where you start. And a lot of people get turned off by the idea of custom, right? They're like, run away, like, oh no, this is going to be expensive if we're doing custom cabinets. But really, it's not horrible. And again, if it's raw cabinets that are being put in, and then your painters paint them, it's not that crazy. It's not as crazy as some people think. The benefit of custom is that you can adapt to the space that you're given. And again, you can be creative on, do I want a drawer here? Do I want a door here? What do I want as far as the functionality goes? In the prefab world, you're very limited sometimes. And what I get frustrated about in the prefab is once it's finished out, sometimes there's gaps in the trim, there's gaps in the toe kick. The ceiling may not be straight, the wall may not be straight, the floors may not be completely level, and you're fixed with a cabinet that's pretty rigid, that's pre-built offsite, that's made out of a box, and it may not adapt to the space very well. So then you're left with some imperfections there versus custom building it to fit the space. And then you get into stain grade stuff, right? So stain grade is going to be, any of your expensive type woods, your white oak, your rift cut white oak, your maples, walnut, all of that kind of stuff. The majority of that stuff is going to be a veneer. And the reason I tell people that is, if you were to build it out of solid wood, most solid wood strips only come in 12-inch planks. So if you have a door that's 24 inches, it's going to be two pieces of solid wood glued together. And it can be done, but sometimes the durability of that long term with moisture, with expansion, contraction in the air and things like that, humidity, all those things can change, and your doors can actually warp on you, working with a true solid piece of wood that's been glued together versus working with something that's a veneer, whether it's an MDF core or it's a plywood core. That's going to be a lot more rigid and sturdy, and it's not going to have that flexibility over time. You're not going to have issues with it. Again, going back to that Deisman house that we did, that was done with all walnut veneer. We did that house 7 years ago, and it's on the market now, and the cabinets look absolutely flawless. They look perfect. With that house, we did a lot of really cool, fancy stuff that had like what you call servo drive, where it's like an electronic lift up touch button sensor where you touch the cabinet. And it literally will open up and fold up for you, and then you hit a little button and it'll shut automatically for you and slow close. So like kind of overkill, right? But I mean, definitely worth showing off to your friends when you're trying to get in the cabinets. You just kind of touch it and it opens up for you, and it'll soft close back in position. So but well, cool. You've got to think ahead. You got to put outlets in. You got to make sure you have a source of power. A lot of things that go into the sequence when you start getting fancy.
Yeah. Well, before this episode, well, really, we had some technical difficulties. I'm hoping we're able to piece all this together, and you don't even know it. But I'm not happy with our software. But halfway through, we got cut off. We're having to start over. I'm like, look, Tavis, do you think you could just talk for 5 or 10 minutes about cabinets? And here we go. Like Tavis can just, you give him a part of the building process, he'll just run with it. And we didn't even talk about all that. Like I have a few videos about some cool features on how to wrap some of the interior drawers around plumbing. And then you have some really cool corner pieces that you can do to really fit some pots and pans and, things in corners of cabinets. And Tavis has a lot of dividers for his different lids and pots and pans. Everything has a place in his cabinet. So he didn't even get started on that whole world. So that might be part 2 of cabinets 101 with Tavis, but I knew he could talk about it. He owned the company for a while. And so the bottom line is if cabinets are something that you've thought about redoing, don't let it intimidate you. You can start anything from just repainting them and putting new hardware on. We had some friends do that recently. They just fill all the old holes, repaint, put new hardware, looks great. Then you can change out the doors and drawers. Then you can go to a completely custom. And from there, you can do the super high-end stuff, which Tavis has awesome videos about, where you're pushing the button and it's serving up a cup of coffee in the process, and it's got lights and all sorts of stuff. And you can spend as much money as you want on those cabinets. So, well, that's really cool. Well, if you have not yet done this, please share this podcast with a friend. Say you've never heard two guys talk so in depth about cabinets on a whim, and send it to your friend. Like and subscribe the podcast. We are over 30 at this point, and for whatever reason, number 30 and 31 have proven to be more difficult from a technical standpoint, and I will be tracking that now. I'm dying. Tracking out the technical issues and the little demons that are living in the computer today and yesterday. I'm not sure what's going on. So, but we have crossed over the 30 barrier. We're super happy about that. So like, subscribe, find me on Instagram, Dallas Real Estate Guy. Find Tavis. That's Travis without the R, Tavis Westbrook, Tavis Westbrook Designs. If you need any sort of design work, full blueprints, full plans, anything like that, he can do that for you. And of course, if you're a realtor out there and you have a house that you need to sell, that you do not have any luck on the MLS, or it's just an off-market deal to begin with, you don't want to mess with the MLS, call Tavis up. He's out there looking. He's looking to do something. I'm looking for a new flip. And so please reach out. We'd love to work with you. Until then, have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.